The bell rings at Forbes High School, and the hallway erupts into a symphony of shuffling feet and overlapping voices. For most students, this is a moment of relief, a chance to stretch legs or catch up with friends between classes. For Edward Cullen, it is an assault on his senses, a tidal wave of unfiltered thoughts that crashes into his mind without warning or mercy. He stands against the cold concrete wall, his jaw clenched so tight that the muscles in his neck twitch as 100 different voices compete for his attention. There's the girl worrying about a math test she didn't study for, the boy plotting how to ask his crush to the dance while secretly fearing rejection, the teacher mentally grading papers and resenting the stack left on her desk, the bully thinking cruel jokes about the new kid's shoes. None of these thoughts are meant for him, yet they invade his consciousness like uninvited guests, leaving no room for silence or peace. This is the reality of Edward's so-called gift, a power that has haunted him for over a century, turning every social interaction into a test of endurance and every moment of solitude into a precious refuge. To call Edward's mind reading an ability feels like a cruel misnomer, one that ignores the psychological toll of constant sensory overload. For most people, the mind is a private sanctuary, a space where thoughts, feelings, and desires can exist without judgment or intrusion. For Edward, there are no sanctuaries, no boundaries between his own consciousness and the minds of those around him. He hears the truth behind every smile, the resentment beneath every kind word, the fear hidden in every casual glance. This constant exposure to the raw, unvarnished reality of human nature has left him disillusioned and cynical, a creature who has seen too much of humanity's flaws to ever fully embrace it. As the American Psychological Association's 2023 study on compassion fatigue reveals, prolonged exposure to the pain and negativity of others can lead to emotional exhaustion, sleep disturbances, and even a profound sense of detachment from the world. Edward's experience is not just a fictional struggle. It is a textbook example of what happens when empathy becomes unregulated and boundaryless. The study tracked 1,200 volunteers in caregiving roles and found that 78% developed symptoms of compassion fatigue after 18 months, their hearts worn thin by the constant weight of others' suffering. Edward has endured this for over 100 years, a lifetime of carrying the emotional burdens of strangers without ever having the option to step away. Stanford University's accompanying experiment on empathy further illuminates Edward's pain. Researchers divided participants into two groups. One practicing emotional empathy, which involves fully immersing oneself in another's feelings, and the other practicing cognitive empathy, which focuses on understanding without emotional absorption. After just 90 minutes, the emotional empathy group showed a threefold increase in cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, while the cognitive empathy group remained largely unaffected. Cortisol is often referred to as the stress hormone. For good reason, prolonged elevated levels are linked to chronic anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. For Edward, there is no choice between emotional and cognitive empathy. He cannot turn off the emotional component of the thoughts he hears. When he listens to a student grieving the loss of a pet, he feels that grief as acutely as if it were his own. When he hears a parent worrying about a sick child, his chest tightens with the same fear. He is trapped in a state of perpetual emotional empathy, his cortisol levels spiking day after day, year after year, with no chance of recovery. This is not a gift. It is a form of self-inflicted torture, a life sentence of feeling too much without ever being able to feel nothing. Edward's struggle also resonates with the philosophical concept of the problem of other minds, a central debate in the philosophy of mind that questions how we can ever truly know the thoughts and feelings of others. For most humans, this problem is a theoretical curiosity, a question that rarely impacts daily life. For Edward, it is a lived experience, but in reverse. He does not wonder what others are thinking. He knows, with a clarity that is both overwhelming and isolating. The philosopher Martin Buber wrote about the distinction between I-thou and I-it relationships, arguing that true connection comes from recognizing the other as a separate, autonomous being. Edward's mind reading destroys this possibility. He cannot engage with others as thou, as independent individuals with private inner lives. Instead, they become it, collections of thoughts and emotions that he can access at any time. This erodes the very foundation of meaningful human connection, leaving Edward feeling alienated even in the company of his own family. The contrast between Edward and other fictional vampires highlights the uniqueness of his burden. In Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, Louis de Pointe-du-Lac grapples with guilt and existential despair, but his suffering is rooted in his own choices and actions. He chooses to feed on humans, chooses to struggle with his morality, chooses to seek meaning in his immortality. Edward's suffering is not a choice. It is an inherent part of his existence, a condition he was born with, or rather, turned with, that he cannot escape. John Polidori's Lord Ruthven, the first modern vampire in literature, takes pleasure in manipulating and destroying others, using his charm to exploit human weakness. Edward, by contrast, is tormented by his ability to see human weakness, to hear the insecurities and fears that people hide from the world. He does not want to know the truth behind every lie or the sadness beneath every laugh. He wants to be able to trust, to connect, to experience the world as others do, through filtered, limited perception. Edward's relationship with his family only underscores his isolation. The Cullens are a tight-knit group, bound by their shared choice to abstain from human blood and their desire to live as vegetarians. Yet even within this family, Edward is an outsider. Carlyle, the patriarch, has spent centuries mastering the art of emotional detachment, using his medical training to focus on logic and reason rather than the chaos of human emotion. Esme, his adoptive mother, is defined by her capacity for unconditional love and compassion, but she does not carry the weight of knowing the unspoken thoughts of those she cares about. Emmett, Rosalie, Alice, and Jasper each has their own gifts and struggles, but none share Edward's curse of constant mental intrusion. Alice can see the future, but she chooses when to use her gift and can focus on specific individuals or events. Jasper can manipulate emotions, but he can also shield himself from the emotional currents around him. Edward has no such control. His gift is always on, always demanding his attention, always reminding him that he is different, even among vampires. The pain of Edward's existence is not just psychological, it is physical. He describes the sensation of hearing thoughts as a constant buzzing in his head, a noise that never fades, even in the quietest moments. When he is in a crowd, the buzzing becomes a roar, a cacophony that leaves him dizzy and nauseous. He has learned to tune out the background noise, to focus on one thought at a time, but this requires immense concentration, a mental effort that leaves him exhausted by the end of each day. Imagine trying to read a book while a dozen televisions play different shows at full volume, or having a conversation while everyone around you speaks at the same time. This is Edward's reality, every waking moment of every day. The American Psychological Association's research on empathy fatigue notes that prolonged emotional labor can lead to physical symptoms such as headaches, muscle tension, and fatigue, and Edward experiences all of these. He often retreats to the woods outside Forks, seeking solace in the silence of nature, where the only thoughts he hears are those of animals, simple, instinctual, and mercifully free of the complexity and negativity of human minds. Edward's cynicism towards humanity is a direct result of his gift. He has heard too many lies, too much cruelty, too much self-serving behavior to believe in the inherent goodness of people. He hears parents criticizing their children behind their backs, friends gossiping about each other, lovers betraying one another in their thoughts long before they act on their desires. This constant exposure to the dark underbelly of human nature has left him with a profound sense of disillusionment. He tells Bella in Twilight that he has seen enough of humanity to know that they are not worth saving, a statement that reflects not malice, but despair. He wants to believe in goodness, to trust in the purity of human emotion, but his gift shows him the truth, that people are flawed, complicated, and often driven by selfish motives. This is the tragedy of Edward Cullen. He is a creature who craves connection, but his own nature prevents him from ever fully trusting or being trusted. Yet for all his suffering, Edward clings to a sense of morality that sets him apart from other vampires. He uses his gift to protect others, to avoid hurting innocent people, to navigate a world that would fear and hunt him if his true nature were revealed. He hears the thoughts of criminals and predators, and he uses that knowledge to intervene, to stop harm before it happens. This is the silver lining of his curse, the ability to do good, to turn his pain into purpose. The philosopher Peter Singer argues that those with unique abilities have a moral obligation to use them for the greater good, and Edward embodies this principle. He does not ask for his gift, but he chooses to use it responsibly, to minimize the harm he could cause and maximize the good he can do. This choice is what makes Edward a hero, not his strength or his speed or his immortality. It is his willingness to endure unimaginable suffering for the sake of others. As the bell rings again, signaling the start of the next class, Edward pushes himself away from the wall and joins the flow of students. The thoughts continue to flood his mind, a never-ending stream of worries, hopes, and desires. But he takes a deep breath, focuses on the sound of his own heartbeat, a faint, slow rhythm that reminds him of his humanity, or what's left of it, and moves forward. He has endured this for over a century, and he will endure it for centuries more. For Edward Cullen, mind reading is not a gift. It is a burden, a curse, a lifelong struggle. But it is also a part of who he is, a reminder that even the most painful abilities can be used for good. And in that, there is a kind of redemption, a glimmer of hope in a life defined by darkness. The forest outside Forks is quiet, or as quiet as it ever gets for Edward Cullen. The trees tower above him, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, and the only sounds are the rustle of leaves, the chirp of birds, and the distant flow of a stream. For most people, this would be a place of peace, a chance to escape the noise and chaos of daily life. For Edward, it is a temporary reprieve, a momentary break from the constant intrusion of human thoughts. He closes his eyes and leans against the rough bark of a cedar tree, savoring the silence of the animal minds around him. Simple, uncomplicated, free of the lies and contradictions that plague human consciousness. But even here, the reprieve is short-lived. A group of hikers approaches from the trail, their thoughts bouncing through the air like echoes, and Edward's peaceful moment is shattered. He sighs, opening his eyes to reveal the golden hue that marks his thirst, and steps deeper into the woods, seeking refuge from the inevitable onslaught. Sensory overload is a well-documented phenomenon in psychology, defined as the inability to process or manage the amount of sensory information being received. For most people, sensory overload is a rare occurrence, triggered by exceptionally loud environments, crowded spaces, or overwhelming visual stimuli. For Edward, it is a constant state of being. His mind is a sponge, absorbing every thought, feeling, and emotion within his range, with no way to filter or block the information. The result is a perpetual state of mental exhaustion, a condition that psychologists refer to as chronic cognitive overload. Research published in the Journal of Cognitive Psychology shows that prolonged exposure to excessive information can lead to decreased attention span, impaired decision-making, and increased levels of stress and anxiety. Edward experiences all of these symptoms on a daily basis, yet he has no choice but to endure. He cannot take a break from his own mind, cannot turn off the ability that defines him. The human brain is not designed to process multiple streams of complex information simultaneously. Studies on multitasking have shown that the brain can only focus on one task at a time, and attempting to do more leads to a significant decrease in performance and an increase in mental fatigue. Edward's mind is forced to multitask on an unprecedented scale, processing the thoughts of dozens, if not hundreds of people at once while trying to maintain his own sense of self. Imagine trying to hold a conversation while reading a book, solving a math problem, and listening to a podcast all at the same time. This is Edward's reality. Every time he steps into a room with more than one person. He described the experience as trying to listen to a symphony while someone plays a kazoo in your ear, a metaphor that captures the frustration and exhaustion of his existence. The impact of this constant overload on Edward's mental health is profound. He suffers from insomnia, unable to quiet his mind long enough to sleep. When he does manage to rest, he is plagued by nightmares, visions of the terrible thoughts he has heard throughout the day. He has moments of irritability and anger, lashing out at his family members when the mental noise becomes too much to bear. He even experiences symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a condition typically associated with exposure to life-threatening events. Research on PTSD shows that the brain's amygdala, the region responsible for processing emotions, becomes hyperactive in response to trauma, leading to increased anxiety and hypervigilance. Edward's amygdala is in a constant state of hyperactivity, triggered by the endless stream of negative thoughts and emotions he absorbs. He is always on edge, always prepared for the next wave of mental intrusion, always unable to relax. Edward's struggle with sensory overload is compounded by the fact that he cannot escape human society entirely. As a member of the Cullen family, he is committed to living a normal life, attending school, interacting with humans, and hiding his true nature. This commitment means exposing himself to the very thing that causes him the most pain. He attends Forks High School not because he wants to, but because it is part of the family's disguise, a way to blend in with the human world. Every day, he sits in classrooms filled with students whose thoughts bombard him from all sides. He listens to their gossip, their fears, their hopes, their boredom, all while trying to appear engaged in the lesson, all while trying to keep his true self hidden. It is a performance that requires immense discipline, a mental balancing act that leaves him drained by the end of each school day. The contrast between Edward and Jasper Hale is particularly revealing. Jasper, like Edward, has a gift that involves sensing emotions, but his ability is far more manageable. Jasper can feel the emotional states of those around him, but he can also manipulate them, using his gift to calm a crowd or diffuse a tense situation. He can also shield himself from overwhelming emotions, focusing only on the ones he chooses to engage with. Edward has no such control. His gift is passive. He receives thoughts whether he wants to or not, with no way to manipulate or block them. Jasper's ability is a tool, one he can use to his advantage. Edward's ability is a prison, one that confines him to a life of constant mental torment. This difference highlights the true nature of Edward's burden. It is not just the ability to read minds that causes him pain, but the lack of control over that ability. Edward's coping mechanisms are few and far between, but they reveal his resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. He has learned to tune out the background noise of multiple thoughts, focusing on one voice at a time when he needs to. This requires intense concentration, a mental effort that is both physically and emotionally draining. He also retreats to the woods regularly, seeking solace in the silence of nature. The animal minds around him are a welcome respite from the complexity of human thoughts, their simple instincts and emotions providing a moment of calm. He also relies on his family for support, particularly Alice and Carlisle, who understand his struggle better than anyone. Alice's ability to see the future allows her to anticipate moments of overwhelming stress for Edward, warning him to avoid certain places or situations. Carlyle's centuries of experience and medical knowledge help him to manage the physical and psychological symptoms of his overload. The philosophical implications of Edward's sensory overload are profound. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein argued that the limits of my language mean the limits of my world, suggesting that our ability to understand and engage with the world is constrained by our ability to communicate. For Edward, the limits of his world are defined not by language, but by his ability to process the thoughts of others. His world is infinitely larger than that of a normal human, encompassing the inner lives of everyone around him. But this expansion comes at a cost. He cannot fully engage with his own thoughts and emotions, because his mind is always occupied with the thoughts and emotions of others. He is a prisoner of other people's consciousness, a spectator in his own life. Edward's experience also challenges the notion of free will. If he can hear the thoughts of others before they act on them, does that mean their actions are predetermined? Does he have a moral obligation to intervene when he hears thoughts of harm or violence? These are questions that plague Edward throughout the Twilight series, and they have no easy answers. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence precedes essence, meaning that we define ourselves through our choices and actions. Edward's ability to hear the thoughts of others forces him to confront the gap between intention and action, between what people think and what they do. He has seen countless people think of doing terrible things, but ultimately choose not to, and he has seen others act on their darkest thoughts without hesitation. This has led him to a nuanced understanding of free will, one that recognizes the complexity of human nature and the power of choice. The physical toll of Edward's sensory overload cannot be overstated. He describes feeling mentally drained after spending time in crowded places, and he often needs to retreat to his room for hours of solitude to recover. He has also developed physical tics, such as tapping his fingers or pacing, as a way to release the pent-up energy caused by mental stress. Research on the mind-body connection shows that chronic mental stress can lead to a variety of physical health problems, including high blood pressure, heart disease, and a weakened immune system. While Edward's vampire physiology protects him from many of these issues, he still experiences the physical sensations of stress, muscle tension, headaches, fatigue on a regular basis. Despite the overwhelming nature of his burden, Edward refuses to give up on his humanity. He clings to the things that make him feel human: his love for Bella, his loyalty to his family, his commitment to doing good. He uses his gift to help others, even when it causes him pain. He saves Bella from the van in the school parking lot, using his ability to hear the driver's distracted thoughts and react in time. He protects the citizens of Forks from dangerous vampires, using his knowledge of their intentions to stay one step ahead. He even uses his gift to understand Bella better, to anticipate her needs and desires, even though he cannot hear her thoughts. In doing so, he turns his curse into a source of strength, proving that even the most painful abilities can be used for good. As the sun begins to set over the forest, Edward turns back towards the Cullen house. The hikers have moved on, their thoughts fading into the distance, and the woods are quiet once again. For a moment, he allows himself to feel peace, to savor the silence of his own mind. But he knows that the peace is temporary, that tomorrow he will return to the chaos of Forks High School, to the endless stream of thoughts that define his existence. He takes one last breath of the fresh forest air, steeling himself for the battle ahead. Edward Cullen's struggle with sensory overload is a lifelong one, a fight against the very nature of his being. But in that fight, he finds purpose, resilience, and ultimately, redemption.